excited to have Jeremy Barnett, founder, CEO of Rad Intelligence, here with us today. If you want to hear expertise in performance-based influencer marketing, how to drive an audience, conversions, traffic, and even how to launch a podcast, this is the episode for you. Jeremy, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Fishman. Much appreciated.
And Jeremy, we've been long-term friends. I've been a fan as well for all of your successes over the year, back from when we first met at a content aggregation tech company startup, all the way through Trendy Butler and what you were doing on the fashion subscription side into your influencer platform here at Rad. It's really been remarkable. A lot of people talk about things, you do them. We'll have a conversation, and the next day I'll see all of that put to life. I've seen pivots in your deck, your product, and it's all very relevant in your success. Do you want to give a little background on your story, everything that you've done to get where you're at here today?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. The thing that you didn't say in all those accolades, which I really do appreciate, is all of the failures that are kind of interwoven amongst some of the successes. I think that's the common denominator, is just being like, I look at myself as a lifelong learner, and I've always had just the desire to not just build but create. And I've had the entrepreneurial bug ever since I was 22, 23 years old. When we met at Eco, I was a different human being. I was mostly focused on the fundraising side of the business and bringing in strategic partnerships, and that was good. That was a good, not just a learning experience, but there was a really good group of people there. That's where I met my future partner for the fashion tech company that we launched in 2014. And that business was a lot of fun. And that's probably where not only I learned about what it really means to be a CEO entrepreneur, but what it means to go through like conflict, what it means to resolve conflict, what it means to grow a business to scale. We grew the business to 25 million a year in less than 3 years. And ultimately I divorced, but before we divorced and before I exited, there were just so many good things that we accomplished at that business. And we built that business with just good old fashioned Facebook marketing, and we would use influencers. And the way we would utilize influencers with Facebook marketing is when we would structure a deal with an influencer, we would get paid permissions to push out the media through their pages on Facebook for a period of like 60 or 90 days. And there was all sorts of complexities associated with that. But once that was done, the influencer or the star or the celebrity or the whoever, once they would create the media, we would push that media out through their Facebook page as opposed to just pushing it out through traditional channels on Facebook. And the reason why that would work is you now get the contextual relevancy of the influencer pushing out a piece of content that they've created, but from their page as opposed to from a business page. Facebook would recognize that. They give it a relevancy score that is meaningful, which means you're getting more reach and ultimately more conversions. And that is really the product that not just is Rad Intelligence today, but that's how we built that business. A lot of Facebook marketing. Facebook was, something that we did not just really well, but we learned all those little ins and outs. As a matter of fact, Facebook wrote us up in their business success stories, which is still on the actual Facebook site, which was cool. But everything moves on. You have, personalities and you have, conflict, and, ultimately everything that was supposed to happen with that deal, it happened. Like, I went my own way. My co-founder went his own way. I founded Rad in 2018, and the idea with Rad is just we just basically are like, hey, how do we take performance marketing and plug that into the influencer ecosystem, which is something that nobody was doing, oddly enough. And performance meaning real conversions, real unique clicks to your site. Yeah.
And I want to go back to Trendy Butler real quick, just from an influencer marketing note. And some of the things I saw you guys doing in the early stage, like ground up. Hey, we have a men's fashion subscription company, small fee per month. You're getting 3 times or more your value, something like that, sent to your door each month, curated for you. I'm from the school of advertising, was in ad tech. We even ran some programmatic campaigns with you early on. But the numbers I was seeing from you at that time from influencers were amazing. And if I'm not mistaken, over time, those audiences became a bit fatigued. And as influencer marketing as a whole works, there's like a trade-off between branding and direct response. And you were telling me you're getting great branding value from everything, but you needed those actual clicks, you needed the conversions, you needed the
Yeah.
performance, which is why I am such a fan of what you guys are doing now over at Rad, and we'll talk further about that as well too. But do you want to paint that picture a little bit of the story of how influencer marketing evolved from maybe like 2016 onward and some of the
Yeah.
changes you saw?
Yeah, it's interesting because when we first launched influencer marketing, we weren't even worried about user generated content. We were just taking assets that we had as a brand. And a lot of times we would take pieces of content that we just would pick up off of the internet, and we'd put like a cool tagline associated with like, get the butler delivered monthly or something like that, with like some cool design or some cool copy. And we were just finding destination pages, like good old school destination pages, meaning like a travel page or a luxury page or some sort of a page about yachting. And we would contact the curator of that page, and we would place our ad on their page or the piece of content on their page, and we were just getting conversions. It was working. So that does not happen anymore, by the way, in the influencer marketing game. But I remember like feeling like we had just discovered gold. Like we would run a campaign and we would spend $100 with an influencer, and it wasn't like an influencer, it was more like a destination page, like I'd said, and we would get 10 conversions. And I was like, wow, we could do this all day long. And once, and I don't want to say we were first doing that, but we were definitely one of the earlier in that game. And what ends up happening as more people find out it's working, like with any channel, is you get a little bit of saturation, you get some bigger dollars that come in, prices change, and what really happens is the value of an impression changes, right? Like in other words, when I see something from a brand today, it means something differently than if I would have seen something from a brand 3 years ago. Now,
Right.
take that into like, okay, like if I see an influencer doing something in 2016 and I see an influencer doing something in 2020, my feeling towards what that influencer doing is totally different. In 2016, I'm more interested because it's new and it's fresh and it's more organic. In today's ecosystem, everybody knows that influencers are getting paid to promote whatever they're promoting. And it doesn't mean that the industry isn't valid, or it doesn't mean that it's fake or it's BS. It just means exactly that. So the impression and the click has to be, number one, a better value prop or a better version of that impression. And the click has to be a higher quality click, which means you have to be a little bit smarter with the way you go about your thinking with who you're engaging with on the influencer side, because it's not just about getting your impressions out there anymore. You want to drive actual performance.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, that's what you need to measure, and you're attesting to that firsthand. And again, just love your whole storyline where you're putting together these tech companies. Now you're doing it for yourself in fashion tech. You're seeing stuff work right out of the gate. I remember those type of influencer cost per acquisition results you were getting were insane. And then you were talking about what Facebook was doing and how you were able to get more consistent, more scalable performance there,
Mm-hmm.
and able to grow it and grow and grow it. And then you evolved it, of course, into Rad. You saw how effective, how meaningful it was for you guys in fashion tech, and you wanted to be able to roll that out to make more groups successful, to get more awesome products, more rad products out to their target audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And when thinking about that, I know a lot of groups would get discouraged, and you start talking about performance metrics. I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
advertisers out there, founders, if something doesn't work out of the gate, they're looking to cut it. They may
Mm-hmm.
be getting real traction with influencer marketing, but they're not seeing those results, and they think it's not doing anything for them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what really resonated for you? How are you able to shift that influencer marketing into performance on the ad side? How are you able to combine it with those destination pages? I love how you brought up
Mm-hmm.
yachting. Were there some destination pages that worked, some didn't?
Yeah. Yeah. So the aha moment that we had was when we started doing these campaigns with some, I don't know if celebrities are the right word, but like, we did like a campaign with with a UFC fighter. We did a campaign with a professional baseball player.
Mm,
And the idea was like, okay, like these people already had like really meaningful Facebook presence. In other words, they already had an established presence. And we were educated enough to know that at the time, Facebook was restrictive with the organic reach. So their whole mission is like, if you would post an organic quote unquote influencer post on a Facebook feed, you're going to see 2%, 3%, 10%, whatever it is that the algorithm decides you're going to be able to see. So if you
Edge
really want to
algorithm.
be able to tap, yeah, exactly. So if you really want to tie into that influencer's audience, you have to pay for it. So we would structure these deals where they would do like a really fun, cool commercial about our brand, 30 to 60 seconds, totally like hardcore startup vibe, but cool and funny and well done. And we would say like, we need to, we want to push the campaign out, but from the page. And at the time in, 2016, 2017, there just wasn't a lot of people doing that. The more sophisticated media buyers today are doing it, but still today, there's not a lot of people doing it. And when we would do that, when we would produce a piece of content and we had control of the influencer's page, we would get unbelievable results. And that was it. It was really as simple as that. So
Yeah.
we had to, you have to support that though. And that's another problem is like when you are running with influencers, you forget that you've got to communicate with their management or with them. You've got to pay them eventually, either at the beginning or the end of the campaign. You have to send them product. Then once you send in the product, you have to wait for them to post and create this piece of content. And then once all those things are done, you're not even sure if it really works. So these are all problematic issues with influencer marketing, either then, which we experienced, or today. And the genesis of how Rad became Rad was, I just was like,
Yes.
how do we take just a bunch of influencers and test and let the data tell us which influencers from that test we're going to want to accentuate and push more paid media through, number one. And number two is, how do we just take big groups of influencers and automatically have those influencers whitelisted? So when we do identify the influencers that work, we can just put more paid media through those pages. And that was really the genesis of Rad, is like, how do we solve those two problems? Because number one, if you're a small or if you're a small or medium-sized business on Shopify, for example, and you're making, say, a $300,000 a year in total revenue, right? You can't afford a $10,000 test with an agency, a $25,000 test with an agency. You really can't afford to waste $3,000 or $2,000 on an influencer campaign unless you know it's going to work. So that was the first thing, is like SMBs are always getting the shit end of the stick when it comes to influencer marketing, because they can't afford to engage with these high profile vanity metric style agencies that are out there. That's the first thing. So like we were thinking like, how do we solve a problem where it's just like, it's influencer marketing, but for everyone? That's the first thing. Everyone meaning for small budgets, people that want to spend $500, $1,000 a month. And number two is, how do we guarantee the performance side of the business? So those are the two problems that we solve with my current venture, Rad Intelligence.
Again, being able to take from your findings, as you mentioned before, failures as well. It sounds like there's some pages that didn't work, some audiences that didn't work, and shape what was driving not only consistent and growing base in your past ventures, and then build a whole company out of it, a whole organization out of it, and making it available for founders to, Fortune 500 level brands who want to run influencer marketing is huge. I mean, we shied away from a lot of influencer campaigns from around 2017 to 2019.
Because you're on the conversion side, so you need to be. You can't, like, your clients are not going to care about impressions or comments or likes. Those are not the metrics that your clients care about. Your clients are like, how
no
much am I
matter how
spending?
well I explain it to them either.
Yes. Yeah. No matter how good of a job, and we know that you do a good job.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because we'll paint media value and like CPMs, but it's exactly what you're saying there. Clients will come to me and say, hey, this budget has to produce the next. It's not you guys. It's we get, it generally takes more of a timeline, but you got to be producing enough revenue for us. We run equity crowdfunding campaigns as well, enough investors for us to where we could do a roll and close and use disbursements to reinvest into this. There simply is no further budget after it. So are we going to take that client, are we going to take that spend to Facebook advertising, where we know we're getting a set amount of impressions and clicks and conversions if we're hitting the performance metrics? Or are we going to take them to influencers? And I love how you pointed out some of the obstacles with influencers. At times we would wait 2-3 weeks to get an influencer to post something past the date they provided. And we're still happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, there's still like, so it's important to understand like influencers are people, and some of them are great and some of them not so much. And same thing with brands. Like some people that are in
Sure.
charge of the budgets with brands are awesome to work with, and some of them not so much. So it's really like that's kind of like a variable that you can't really plan for. Again,
Sure.
one of the problems with influencer marketing. So what we have thought, this is the way we think about everything here. It's just like you have content, blogs, videos, articles. You've already produced these pieces of content. They're there. They're assets that you invested into. Give us all of your content. Tell us how much you want to spend for a unique click that's targeted. And we're going to basically open up that content in our marketplace for influencers to select through and share. Simple as that. And
Yes.
maybe on a campaign that is a $2,000 campaign or a $1,000 campaign, maybe we have somewhere between 50 to 150 influencers that pick it up across several different industries or sectors or whatever. And the top performing clicks based off of the pre-designated metrics that you've given us before the campaign, those are going to be the influencers that continue to drive the traffic because that's who we're going to optimize to. So the same way that when you are optimizing a Facebook campaign, like if you set up a Facebook campaign, you are training the pixel to look for specific things, right? So you're either training the pixel to look for the lowest possible click through a targeted audience, or you're training the pixel to convert the lowest cost of acquisition driven sale through a targeted audience. One of those two things is what you're, or how you're training the pixel. We're doing the same exact method of process and thinking. However, it's with influencers and the performance of the clicks that the influencers drive. So you start
Yes.
off with 150 influencers. We identify 5 or 6 or 7. And from there, it's just a matter of now we're basically saying, okay, we want more of this type of influencer. It's a persona. In other words, it's maybe a makeup or a beauty influencer that likes to do DIY videos and she's really done up from head to toe. It's not the beauty influencer that's very natural. It's that beauty influencer that's really, really done up and she's between like 24 to 27 years old. When we identify that persona, we now know that that persona converts. And now you have a group that you can push continual paid media through, and you know you're going to get your return on ad spend.
And this is revolutionary. And not just saying that, I have you on the show for a reason here because of the utility it plays. And especially for an agency like us, where I mentioned marketing budgets have to produce the next spends for the client. We
Yeah.
could invest in influencer direct type campaigns, get their rate card, and it's going to be hit or miss to say the least in terms of whether it's going to produce more value on an awareness level or direct response, and simply can't take those risks with certain clients. Now, using platforms like yours, and it's what we've been driving results from for clients and have been blown away in the sense of it's not even a choice of, hey, Facebook advertising or influencers. We're running Facebook advertising from influencer pages. Ultimately, we
Well,
don't have to worry about all the communications back and forth. We could buy on
yeah.
a cost per click. We could
Hmm.
track all the measurements with the conversion pixel coming through, and then A/B test towards not just the influencers that are working best, but the creatives, the time of day, the day of week, the offering messaging inside. It makes it seem like I shouldn't be running Facebook advertising from a brand page. I should only be doing it from influencer pages.
Through influencer pages, you're definitely going to get a better response like you guys have been getting. And by the way, you were a very difficult client to get signed up. I mean, honestly, I think I was like, I know how it is. You wanted to make sure the product was right, and you wanted to make
Yeah,
sure you weren't screwing up your existing clients. So, we were we're excited to have you guys as a client, and
sure.
we the whole thing that you said is also what we tell our customers, whether you're an SMB on Shopify or whether you're an agency that's using our product, is all of the complexities that are associated with influencer marketing. When you're doing user generated content, keep doing it. That's fine. But just know that it's not just you're paying the influencer, you're paying the manager, maybe you're paying some sort of a system and an infrastructure to support that. It's the time associated with the back and forth to figure that variable out. And then there's what do you get? What are you getting from it outside of impressions or comments or clicks? And what does that really mean? And there's definitely a home for that with certain types of customers. And I'm not saying that that's bad, but if you just want to do influencer marketing, set it, forget it, optimize it based off of what our algorithm is telling you is working and isn't working,
Hmm.
then you are this, like, that's what Rad is. And that's why I think the small and medium-sized businesses that are out there, they're neglected with they don't have a lot of options, because nobody, like, if you're making, 300 grand a year on Shopify, like I mentioned earlier, how much money can you really spend with an agency or with a group to help you with your marketing? So it's kind of like, it makes sense, right? Like, I mean, you don't, and most of these, e-commerce store owners, they're not marketers, or, maybe they are, but, they don't understand how to get in there and really, really do Facebook, or manage Facebook or Instagram or any of the channels that are out there. So our product is a really good tool for them, because it's going to give you that branding that you do want. And that's important. The branding is important. You get the content, you get the visual satisfaction of getting influencers posting, but you're also getting sales, and you can directly track and attribute those sales to the performance of the influencer posts. So that's the key differentiation of what Rad is and good old fashioned traditional influencer marketing.
Absolutely. I want to make another differentiation there. And by the way, I like how you said we are tough. We are analytical, because we do have to, based on the numbers, make sure the
Hmm.
performance checks out, test the right things before unleashing it to more clients. And I come from an ad tech background, where I would be getting these questions in, requests for proposals, requests for meetings, requests for information, spreadsheets with the biggest agencies owned
Hmm.
by the top 4 holding companies. And if I didn't have an answer in the snap of a finger, we were off consideration. They'd say we were a few months out from a test or anything. So we try to run our agency in the same way, and in some cases with more precious budgets, if you will, and
Hmm.
want to speak to more of the advanced Facebook media buyers out there, more of the advanced marketers. Um,
Hmm.
your platform, does this make it uh, available to use Facebook advertising techniques, such as custom audience uploads, where you can upload an email list and have influencers actually talking to the recipients within that list? Could you do lookalike audience modeling? Can you
Hmm.
do other types of ad formats, like lead forms, or some of the things that make Facebook amazing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're a approved API partner with Facebook, so we have publishing permissions, managed pages permissions, all the permissions that are needed to run the media, however is the most effective, or however you are looking to convert your, like, if you have a KPI, sometimes KPIs are interesting. Like, sometimes it's sales, sometimes it's, they just want a lot of targeted clicks and they want to put them into a retargeting funnel.
Yep.
Sometimes they want a lot of content, right? Like, that's another way that people use our product and platform. But really, however you're designating, whatever is most important to you is how we're going to run the campaign and how the campaign is going to be optimized. So the structure is very similar to any paid media campaign, not just on Facebook, but Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest or any of the paid social channels that you would be working with. And the idea is, instead of using it through your traditional business page, you're just using the influencer's persona to push out the media. And if you're running a lot of paid media and you're using influencers as a driver, that you probably have a couple people that work for you, that work in marketing, or that work in, client relations, that are just in charge of getting the influencers the product, that are in charge of making sure the influencer get paid, that are in charge of, once the influencer gets the product that they post, that are in charge of trying to figure out how to make sense of what the value was of what they did once it's done. That's a department usually, or it's a couple of people usually. So you understand that, like, if I come to you and say, hey, we can do that, but it's completely automated, and you don't have to find source, negotiate, or any of that with the influencers. However, you're only going to be syndicating your existing assets. That's the key differentiation from, like, once you're in a flow. So you can take things that you've already created, videos that you've already created, product pages that you have, and you can syndicate. And that's the idea with the platform.
Syndication, and that takes me back to some of the other products Rad's built. I want to use some of the show format here of test, optimize, scale. Obviously, what you built speaks for itself. As you're working with some of the biggest brands in the world, you're also able to service smaller, more founder level companies, marketers, with very easy to activate processes. How did you build all this? What did you have to test to get here? What didn't work right out of the gate that you optimized? And what did you really scale? This could be talking about the product, the team, or your own, marketing and client development. What type of insights could we package for the audience to kind of activate on their own?
Well, so the first thing is as a CEO founder or as a marketer or as a digital advertiser, you have to be committed to being a lifelong tinkerer.
Mm,
So there's never a time, if you're running a business or if you're running a budget or if you're trying to get conversions, that you're not just in tinker mode. You're always optimizing. You're always figuring out where there's pockets of success, where there's pockets of failure, what you can eliminate, what you can accentuate, and everything in between. So that's the first like framework, is like you have to have that mindset that you're always going to be tinkering. And that's part of the challenge with digital marketing, is there's always another solution right down the street. There's always another person that's doing it this way that looks interesting. So because of this variable of like, you need to be a tinkerer, and because there's so many solutions, that creates an opportunity to also be very distracted. So there's kind of a couple different things that you have to figure a nice balance between, of like making sure that you have that tinkerer mindset, but also making sure that every shiny object that comes by, you're not like over here and over there and over there, to where you're not giving the things that you've set up an opportunity to be successful. So how that relates to, Rad and our story at Rad, is we started with another product, which was also a content syndication product that we took to market. We had some success with it. And the problem is that product just didn't catch on the way we thought it would. And when we really, really dug into that ecosystem, which was, publisher relationships and content syndication, but in a different framework. And I want to go too deep into what it was. But when we really asked ourselves these hard questions, the answers to these hard questions were the product just wasn't perfect. We could sell it and we could turn it into a business, but it wasn't that home run that we were looking for. And what we found with Rad, when Rad came to us, and this is Rad, we acquired a company in July, which we morphed into Rad. We rebranded it. And the reason why we acquired the company is because the method of process and thinking we liked, and the case studies that they had in Latin America they were just exceptional. But there were still problems there. But when we looked at that, in my mind, I'm like, wow, this is a broken industry. Influencer marketing is an ugly, broken industry. If you talk to investors about influencer marketing, they literally run the other way. Most people that you talk to about influencer marketing, depending on if it's an SMB or a larger brand, they're going to give you a completely different understanding of what they think influencer marketing is. Most people have had, negative or somewhat negative experiences with it on certain levels. And it's just a lot of like kind of broken processes. And then if you look at like the market and who are the people that are in the quote unquote influencer marketing game, there's a lot of companies that have like a very similar feel and look. A lot of CRM companies, workflow companies, influencer identification companies. And we felt like the influencer marketing part of it is what makes people understand what we're doing. In other words,
mm,
that's what we're doing. But really, we're not an influencer marketing company. We are in the content syndication game. And
mm,
we're using social media user feeds as our method of distribution. And we look at Facebook as it's a service layer to our product. It enables us to get more reach on campaigns. But our real, what I would call like value proposition, is being able to do this in a controlled environment and being able to do it to where you're not taking a lot of risk as a brand or putting a bunch of time into it. And when we figured out these things were actual pain points, they weren't just like what I suffered with at Trendy, but we figured like, wow, these pain points are pain points that others are having. And we were verifying that by actually running tests, getting feedback from clients, and really having those ugly internal conversations where like we're saying, hey, this is the product and there's some good stuff here, but this isn't right, and this isn't right. And having like almost like a ruthless mentality of like, I need to understand not just the good when we're pitching, but I need to really understand what's wrong. And not just from what I'm shoving down your throat as a seller, but I need to hear from the client, like, what are the things that you really want that are valuable? And the hardest thing about producing or starting a product, when you launch a product, the absolute hardest thing is taking yourself out of it and being able to look at things almost like subjectively and say to yourself, does my customer need this product?
mm.
Is it a need to have, or is it, yeah, it's cool, we're working with them, I'm kind of buddies with the founder? Or is it something like, it's so good that when you take it away, they're like, oh, no, give me that. I want that. This is a part of my thing, right? is it so good that the people that are working with you feel like they're in on this like little secret that nobody else knows, right? So when you ask yourself these questions, the only person that knows the answers to these questions are typically the CEO and or the founders of the company. And if you're starting a business or you're marketing a business, you also have to ask yourself these really hard questions, right? Am I just getting some smoke blown up my ass by a person who's really smart, who understands media buying better than I am when I'm talking to them? Or am I getting real results? And the only way you can actually ask yourself these smart questions and know the answers is if you go through the pain and suffering of really just doing it. So there's a
Mm.
process of doing that has to be a part of your flow.
Those are remarkable notes for anyone to follow there. I want to emphasize a few things that you were saying. You started testing a product that appeared to be amazing, and
Mm-hmm.
you weren't necessarily happy with the response that was coming back. And you talked about removing yourself from it, and some of the challenges that took, as a creator, but
Mm-hmm.
really surveyed your audience, figured out what they liked, really tried to understand what they didn't, and created something that, allowing the numbers to speak for themselves, is outperforming what you were doing before. It's taking
Mm-hmm.
your team to new levels, and that's only because you tested some stuff out, and with those optimizations, you've been able to manage it to an effective point. And I've seen a lot of founders stopped by that. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen individuals, and I talk about grit. I think I mentioned this on your podcast as being
Yeah.
this characteristic that's needed for all of the obstacles that are going to be thrown at you as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, more or less. And sometimes that grit can be placed in the wrong place. There's no pivoting, and it's just this hands tied type of feeling to the product. But you really
Mm-hmm.
changed it up, and you let your audience do the talking. Instead of scrapping the whole thing, you said, hey, influencers provide social proof, they provide
Mm-hmm.
validation. There's something there. Instead of just providing syndication outside of the walled gardens, as you would
Yep.
always say, outside of the social media platforms and having it
Yep.
running on ads and other sites, let's really lean in and let's
Mm-hmm.
leverage what's not working, what's broken in the social media game, because that was true. Some of the biggest influencer networks were having trouble with their billing model, with
Mm-hmm.
so many different aspects of what they're doing on the performance side. And you were ultimately able to craft this thing that's more powerful because of your agility through the whole process, is what it sounds like, and what people could really take from that.
Yeah, you got to be nimble. So what you're saying is like, so when you start a company, there's this like negative connotation. Like when you hear somebody say like, "Oh, we had to pivot," a lot of times people are like, "Oh, that's you just screwed up there." Or like, yeah, the pivot means you're going out of business or whatever. And like the reality of it is like you have to just have this ruthless mentality of like, there's no failure to the business, but what the business is today is not going to be what it is in 2 years or 3 years. Like, in other words, like you have to figure out that
Yes.
thing that catches, that's so beautiful and perfect that you don't have to sell it so hard. It's easy. When you get somebody, you talk to them like, oh yeah, I want that. Cool. Why didn't I do this before? Right? Like, oh, how have I never heard of this? And it's so good that you're getting referrals and you get this like natural audience of people that love what you're doing because it's special. But the thing about it is you have to have the mindset associated with like being okay with doing multiple different iterations. It's like that lean startup methodology. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, but you just have to have that methodology in place of like, we're going to be testing hyper-focused iterations of things that are going to give us results. And that's going to be the data that we use to drive product.
Mm.
So it's a really interesting thing because you have to not be a quitter. You can't punk out, but you have to be willing to just scrap ideas the second you realize they're not working. You have to, like, as a founder or CEO of a company, it's not just scrap ideas the second a marketing channel isn't working, the second that there is a relationship that needs to be axed, the second that there is a partnership that needs to be rethunk, the second that there's any sort of new idea that needs to be explored, you have to constantly be in attack mode. And if you get into the mindset of just letting things fester and not dealing with them or waiting for them to come to fruition, really being a CEO is not what you should be doing. because in order to run a company, you have to be in the mindset of you're always constantly adapting and pivoting. And the same way you optimize a media campaign, you are optimizing your company or you're optimizing your product. Test Optimize Scale is a beautiful name because it's literally applies to pretty much any methodology associated with running your business, whether you're a CEO, a marketer, or a product representative. Everything has to be tested before you can basically even get into thinking of like, how do I optimize? And then you're certainly not scaling anything unless once you've tested and optimized, you've seen the results that warrant scale. So it's a very tried and true method of thinking if you're applying it the right way across your business practices.
Absolutely. And that's why I've been able to simplify it into the way I define marketing, recommend good marketing is
Mm-hmm.
in those three words, because it applies to any brand, looking at the audiences, the channels, the funnel that they're going down. And I love how you applied it to actual business, almost like a scientific method, or life as a whole. So you're setting it up to measure it off the numbers, off the analytics, off the things that really matter, instead of just an assumption that, hey, people are going to love this.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, what are they really responding to? What are they not? How can we improve this?
Well,
We work with,
Jason, like
yeah,
with Facebook, not all clicks are created equal, right?
yes,
And not all women are created equal, and not all men are created equal. In life,
of
not all
course.
things are created equal. So with an influencer campaign, if I say, hey, I'm going to give you 25 cents a click, and we've got super influencer over here who is hyper contextually relevant for my brand. And then we've got this, maybe it's a mom or a dad who makes no sense whatsoever. And they both generate that same click for 25 cents. But this click over here is much more valuable. Why? Because the audience that cares about this influencer is more interested in your product, whereas the audience that follows mom or dad over here doesn't care. So that's
Mhm.
the thinking pattern that we have. It's like, it's not just running influencer marketing, it's understanding the clicks that are coming from the influencer campaign. And then the other part of it is by structuring an environment that's not a heavy lift for the brand and it's not a
Mhm.
heavy lift for the influencer. That's really, really important. The influencer, if you give the influencer, like, you got to create a video, you got to produce this user generated content, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, all of a sudden they got to wake up, they got to get out of bed, they got to brush their teeth, they got to work, they got to video, they got to edit, they got to deal with you critiquing their work and all that crap. So if you remove all of that friction and just say, hey, you just need to spend 10 seconds posting this piece of content, and then we're going to amplify it based off of the performance. Now you have an environment that's very easy for both to say, okay, yeah, let's do that. It's a couple minutes out of my day, and let's see if it works. And then if it works, you amplify it. So that's kind of like another part of the thinking pattern here, is just like, how do you just simplify all the noise to where it's just really, really easy?
Yeah, and easy to amplify, easy to
Mm-hmm.
scale. That's why I'm such a big fan of advertising. And obviously, it's the word I use most because it's so scalable. You can say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is working. I want twice the amount of conversions next week. I want
Mm-hmm.
twice the amount of views, twice the amount of impressions, whatever it may be. Uh, it's very systematic, algorithmic in how that is produced. So, going back to examples with fashion tech, or
Yeah.
investor acquisition campaigns that we run, we can hit these different milestones as long as the conversion rates and click-through rates maintain the same levels. And you guys have made that possible with influencers, leveraging ad tools. And again, it's really next level.
I appreciate that, man. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. And by the way, you're going to be a client of ours for a very, very long time. And
Yes.
that's just what it, and by the way, audiences of your audience should know that Jason and I also often do smoke cigars together. He's a
Yes.
mate of mine for years. We've known each other for over a decade. So we've seen multiple iterations of everything, but you've been very, very steady. You were one of my inspirations with why I started our show, our podcast on our end. And this is a lot of fun. We get to kind of have a little bit of therapy during this kind of weird time that the world's going through right now. And we get to stay connected by doing this type of stuff. And, look, there's the one thing you realize when you run a business or you're doing a marketing campaign or when you're trying to figure out like how to uncover or like unpick the lock to this matrix of success is there's not like a lot of perfect answers that are out there. Like there's
Right.
kind of like a thing, like as a leader or as a thought leader, or as an entrepreneur or as a CEO or founder or whoever you are, it's kind of like you just kind of continue putting yourself in position to get lucky and get successful. And if you're willing to go out there and grab it when it's there and you're ready and you've got the things that are part of what makes you successful, like ready to receive it, and then you're going to get it. But there's not a lot of luck in life, but luck finds you. And when it finds you, you need to be ready to grab it. That's kind of like the way I
Yes.
look at it. And like, I always say, it's like you put another line in the water. Like if you're running a company, you're raising money, or you're optimizing a campaign and you're testing different channels, you just keep on putting these really good high quality lines in the water, right? And the
Yeah.
more lines that you have in the water, but the better chance you have success. But the lines, if they're in the water, every couple days that worm that's on there dies and you got to put a new worm on there, right? So you always have to make sure that like every relationship you're cultivating or every campaign that you're going through management of, like, how does this work, doesn't work, like there's relationships that need kind of like that. You got to cultivate it. You got to learn. You got to go through the process of understanding of like who you're working with, why you're working with him or her. The campaign, is it working? Is it not working? But these are the parts of it that are like, you need to just continue watering. And life has a funny way of giving people like, eventually the world has a funny way of like letting you be successful if you're doing what you need to be successful. I don't see a lot of people out there just getting lucky that were like, oh, right place, right time. I went to the baseball game and I sat next to investor X and I got $700 million. It's like, that doesn't
No.
happen. What happens is you bust your ass, you work hard, you eat shit a couple times, you stress out a little bit, you try and have work-life balance. Some people do it, some people don't. But at some point, if you're smart and you're doing what you need to do and you're living right, you will get to success. That's just a fact of life. And usually if you're not getting there, there's a problem, right? There's usually a problem associated with it that keeps you from success on something. Maybe it's you're not willing to have confrontation in your life. Maybe it's you have a bunch of schmucks in your life and you're not willing to basically root them out of your life. Maybe you're not living right in somewhere in your life, and that thing that you're doing has ripple effects that you're not even seeing. I've been through this thing to the point where like now I see it so clearly. Like you have to live the right way in order to get to the place that you want to be, which is ultimate success. And success doesn't necessarily have to mean you're super, super rich. It just means that you're doing what you want to do when you want to do it. You're waking up in the morning and you get to cultivate these beautiful options. Jason, you and I are going to wake up tomorrow morning and we're going to smoke a fucking cigar. Beep. Sorry for the language, but that's something that we would do because we want to do it. It's fun, right? Same sort of thing. That's what entrepreneurialism is. That's what being an entrepreneur is. It's like you got that optionality associated with your life. So, it's a lot of fun, man. Doing these things with you,
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. Talking about this stuff, it's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It's hard to top that. You have so many good recommendations. There's so many good insights. You're not gonna get lucky if you're hedging on that. If you
Mm-hmm.
think luck is what's gonna get to these points, if you think if you build it, they will come, certainly not gonna happen. You could position for luck over a long term time span. I think you smoke at the right cigar bars for 10 years.
Totally.
Like
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
the
yeah, that's us. For
like
sure.
you rub out, you go to the right conferences every week, or but you position for it. Meanwhile, you're going after tactics, after systems that are going to produce for you in the meantime. And you bring on 10 new clients. One of them are at a much larger level or a much more meaningful level of market share in their vertical. But you certainly can't hope for it. You have to just keep hustling every day. I think you're
Absolutely.
sending all the right messages out there, and on your podcast as well too. So the Rad Intelligence podcast, we've talked about the brand. Make sure to check out the podcast as well too. Want to give you the final curtain, the final stage here. Before telling the audience where they could find you, what else do you want to
Mm-hmm.
leave them with today? Again, such a profound level of experiences. They say you can't be an expert at something until you've failed at it every way you can. Really what you're taking from your stories and allowing people to stand on your shoulders from there is huge. Is there anything you want to end them with today before telling them where they could find you?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes on these shows we talk a lot about like good stuff. We talk a lot about like the success and how to be successful, and sometimes we think that it's like, hey, it's just this like thing, like you're working really hard and it's really great and it's really easy. And the thing I talk a lot about, just the entrepreneurial journey, and not just the entrepreneurial journey, but it ties into your personal journey, is like there's a lot of failure that is interwoven into the successes. And it's
Mm.
the failures that make, those are the interesting things that give you experience. And the thing about failures, or we'll call them learning experiences, is that it depends on what you do with those learning experiences, and how you treat those learning experiences is ultimately going to dictate your map and where you're going to be in 5 years, 10 years, and so on. These are the really, really important things. So, like, look, there's a world right now that's out there that is very much upside down and really weird. So there's kind of like this pause for the last few months, and it looks like things are going to stay paused for another few months, right? And who knows, right? But during this time frame, there's absolutely no excuses for entrepreneurs, men and women that are out there, to do everything in their power to do whatever they need to do to be this much better when they get done. It's time to consume Audible books. It's time to consume podcasts. It's time to launch something new that you were thinking about doing. If you're anything like me, work has become like a very therapeutic environment. So I would say, like, the one thing is, like, embrace the ugliness of what your history is. Embrace the things that you've
Wow.
screwed up on, and embrace those things, because those things make you a special human being. And not only that, once you can start thinking of those things, like, look around the people that you're around and you're working with. Are these people doing the things that you look at? Are they living the right way? Are they thinking the right way? Are they basically leading or being leaders or being led the right way? Are these people like the people that you want to associate yourself with? Because you are the sum of the 10 people that you're around most often. And that's a thing that I used to think about all the time, that I still think about all the time, is, am I really not just walking the walk, but am I surrounding myself with people that are pushing me to be a better human being, not just a better marketer or a better entrepreneur or a better CEO, but a better human being? And I have found that the more conscious you are of these things, the more okay you can get with conflict, the more okay you can get with constructive conflict. And that's kind of like the ingredients, like, of like, what do you look at when you want to say, like, well, what does a successful CEO or look like, or what does a successful founder look like? The first thing I always say is, you have to get really comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. You have to get you have to get so good with it that you take the emotion out of it, and you have to get really, really good at not just taking the emotion out of it, but doing it from a place of respect, and remembering that when you're disassociating with somebody or another human being, or maybe you're terminating a relationship, you're dealing with a human being, and you need to think about how you would want to be treated in that position. There's a lot of people that are out there, when they terminate relationships or when they move on from relationships, they just blow it up, right? Like, that's the thing. They blow up the relationship. It's got to be World War III, or it's got to be these back channel conversations, or it's got to be like, oh, he's effing me, or she's effing me, or, oh, we got to be sidelined down low over there. And when you do that stuff, that is really not what the ingredients for success is. Like, you can be very direct with somebody and take care of yourself and treat that person in a way that's going to allow you to lay your head up, on your pillow at night and feel like you're doing the right thing. And it. Like, these are the things, like, as a person that's dealing with people, when you're doing right, and you also know when you're doing wrong. So if I was going to say anything, get comfortable with constructive conflict. It's the breakfast of champions, number one. Number two is, ask yourself, who are the people that I'm surrounding myself with? Who are the people that I'm working with? And are these the people that I look up to enough to be pushing me to go to the next level? Or am I surrounding myself with a bunch of people that are co-signing on my bullshit? And number three is, what are you doing right now to where, when this unfortunate world situation is over and we're back to normal, that you're way further along, either in your skill sets, your company is further along. What have you done to be a part of the second solution that's coming out there that we haven't seen yet, either in your business, in your personal affairs, or in your skill sets? What are you doing to be that much bigger, faster, stronger, to when the world gets back to number? Those would be the three things that I would leave people
Well, I'm definitely gonna be quoting you on that, Jeremy. Those are
with.
those are perfect. Those are so powerful in terms of recommendations. Getting comfortable with constructive conflict. I mean, huge, and something everyone could always be improving. In my perspective, it's been something that I've really been conditioned for over the years. The second one, your network. I like saying something that your net worth is your network. So I love how you put the focus on that. And the third, intentionality. What path are you going down at all given times, including right now when the world's a little funky? For a while there, everyone was at home. Now things are mixed up depending on who you're talking to. Some people are open, some people are closed, but everything's changing. That's a fact. So what are you doing? What are you focusing on? Are you looking at work as therapeutic, like you mentioned? Are you feeling good about what you're doing at the end of the day? Are you actually putting impact and value into the world? And most importantly, what path does that put you on? Where's that going to leave you when this is all in the next stage?
Fun show,
Love
man.
it.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me on. Good stuff. We
This
could
has
talk
been
all
great.
day.
This has been a blast. And Jeremy, we'll have contact info below here, but what's the best method for someone to get hold of you?
You could reach me on LinkedIn, just at Rad Intelligence or at Jeremy Barnett on LinkedIn. Either one of those, you'll be able to find your way to me. And, I respond to all messages as long as you're not trying to sell me something and I don't know who you are. But if you have a sincere question or comment or concern, and it's not something that's like, hey, I want you to try this cool product and you haven't looked at my profile or any of that kind of stuff, I'm happy to respond.
Excellent. Excellent. Love that you're accessible. Like I mentioned, we've been, rooting you on with everything on your endeavors. I've been listening to your podcast and shows weekly. It's awesome. Everyone should check it out. I'll be looking forward to your cover on Cigar Aficionado one day. And thanks again for being on the show today.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. Take care of yourself. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.